the Education Policy and Reform Unit at UNESCO Bangkok. At EPR, she leads a team working on education sector planning and management with a specific focus on equity, quality, and efficiency of education systems. She is also heavily involved in providing technical assistance to the UNESCO member states in the areas of education sector planning and education simulation modeling. She also serves as a head of the Secretariat of the Asia Pacific Education Research Institute Network, ERI.net, a regional network of education policy research institutes. Ms. Satoko Yano will be presenting on policies and planning for future education. Ms. Satoko Yano.
Thank you very much. And very good morning, all. And as I introduced, my name is Satoko Yano, working for UNESCO office in Bangkok, which is a regional office for education covering 48 countries of the Asia-Pacific region. And I'd like to join other speakers and to express our sincere appreciation for the organizers for this very generous invitation and for giving us an opportunity to present some of the work that UNESCO is doing in this very important area. You might be wondering what my presentation will be about. Policy and planning for future education, what it's all about. I'm not going to talk too much about technology. Actually, I'm not going to talk about technology at all. But my presentation is more about policy and planning implications for reforming education for the future with a regional perspective. So I'd like to start my presentation with this question: is education ready for the future? I think that we have very, very sort of common feeling about this, to answer this question. People might, I think we all agree that the many education systems currently we have available continue to focus on knowledge, skills, and values that will become very soon obsolete and irrelevant. But then instead, actually education systems need to be more forward-looking in order for us to build better futures. And I think we all agree. And why? Do we need different types of education? Because the world is changing, as we know in front of us. Day by day it's changing. And there are several factors that are influencing such changes. And firstly, economically, we are changing very, very rapidly. At one time, on one side, we have seen a very robust economic growth, especially in this region. If you look at about in 25 years, in the recent 25 years, the number of middle-income countries in this region have doubled. At the same time, we all feel that there is a widening inequality within the country or among the countries. And also, more and more people are being underemployed or unemployed, or employed in the less secure informal sectors. So that this gives a lot of implication of what kind of skills are in demand. And also at the same time, the labor market demands and structure, economic structure is changing. We can see, like many countries, we have more people employed in the service and industry, and less people being employed in the agriculture sector. Obviously, there's a huge implication of what kind of education we should be providing. And then if you look at the current, in these very key tech-savvy jobs that are in high demand at the moment, none of them existed even 10 years ago. And if you look forward, in the future, some researchers, some experts say, okay, almost half of the jobs will be replaced by machines, especially those who we used to consider those high-level white-collar jobs. And also, in addition to these economic changes, we are also facing some social changes. This region, the UNESCO covers these 48 countries of the world under the Asia-Pacific region. It's the world's largest region. We have more than 60% of the total population in the region, and we speak 50% of the languages spoken in the world. Huge diversity within the region and within also sub-regions. And then sometimes that might bring about some tensions between them. And among these diverse populations, people are moving around, more and more people are moving around, coming to your country, going to another country, working together with different kind of people. Again, this is not an easy task for people to do. And at the same time, as we all know, we are facing more and more climate and natural disasters, and the climate also changing, and how to work, how to live in a sustainable way is a key challenge if we want to ensure better futures for our next generations. So all these things, we all realize that education must be more about bringing in the more holistic development of the people, not only about learning, obtaining, acquiring knowledge and then skills that are necessary for jobs, but more about communicating with others or working with others, and then being more critical and creative. So these are the skills that we felt or we heard from the countries in the region that they feel important. Yes, and then technology and information technology is there, but it's more about how to use such technologies. But often these are called 21st century skills, but that they're not actually completely new. And if you look at the UNESCO's or UN's work in the past 70 years, we can start maybe even 70 years ago. UNESCO was founded on the belief that peace must be built within people's mind. Therefore, education is a foundation for building a peaceful society. And also, in about more than 40 years ago, 43 years ago, actually UNESCO came out with this report called For Learning to Be. It talks about education is more like a lifelong learning perspective. So education doesn't stop at school, but the people must continue learning. And this report talks about the future, potential future impacts on education. And we were quite surprised to see how relevant they are to the world we face now. It talks about the impact of technology and the changing in the labor market, as well as increasing inequality. It was already there 40 years ago. And it talks about importance of the comprehensive and then more development and holistic development of the people. 1996, and also UNESCO came out with another report showing that there are 4 pillars of learning. Learning to know, learning to do, skills and knowledge. Yes, they are very, very important. But in addition to that, learning to be a good person, as well as learning to live together with others. Also, we found it very key to education. And we continued that way, and in 2002, there was a UN decade on education for sustainable development, putting education as a change agent for building sustainable future. And in 2012, UN came up with another initiative called Global Studentship Education. It's about how to build a global community, how to become, each of us can become a global citizen who is collectively responsible for building a sustainable future for all. And very recently, last week actually, in New York, UN Summit met and adopted 17 new sustainable development goals. It's a big change from Millennium Development Goals we had 15 years ago. We are talking more about sustainability. We understand that the development paradigm you have been following for the last so many years will not be feasible and sustainable. Therefore, we need to start thinking about environmental friendliness, and then also reducing inequality and these other key issues. And among them, education is very high, prominently featured. There is one specific goal saying by 2030, we need to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. So it's very similar to what we have been talking. Education, learning opportunities must be available for all, regardless of where they're from, how much they have, and what they're coming from. So, and also such learning, such education must be of quality, must be relevant, what they need to, in order for them not only to get a job or create their own job, but also to live more meaningful and peaceful life, and then contribute to the society at large. So in that context, I'd like to inform you that UNESCO Bangkok has been conducting quite a few studies and research looking at different perspectives of education in this Asia-Pacific region, how these big ideas of integrating 21st century skills into education are being translated into action in countries in Asia-Pacific. Some studies looked at teachers, some looked at policy and legislations, some on curriculum, some assessment. So it's a big area, so we're still trying to have clear ideas, but then some key findings so far include that in policy areas that it is very, very clear that there is a general trend that all the countries in the region saying that the 21st century skills, acquisition of 21st century skills is a key to success. I have worked in this region from very highly developed economies to the least developed systems, but every single one of them said 21st century skills is important, regardless of their development stage. And among these 21st century skills we so-called, especially creative and innovative thinking and then communication skills are considered critical in most of the countries. However, there are many challenges for translating these ideas into the actual actions. Some of them are related to definitions of such 21st century skills. This is just an example of how people might call these skills in different countries. I think in Malaysia we use 21st century skills, but some countries are more general competencies, or more soft skills and higher order thinking. Some of them are in combination of these things, and some people might be using the same term, but by meaning different things. So coming up with a common understanding was really, really difficult. Actually, UNESCO Bangkok, we haven't really been successful in actually deciding the term. And there are big operational challenges. Sometimes, yes, ideas are there, definitions are there, but there's no teaching and learning materials based on that. Teachers are not adequately trained to implement such policies, or there is no assessment tools to measure the progress of the learners in these areas. And there's also challenges related to systems, how the education system works at large. I think there was someone already said this, okay, the curriculum already very, very, very heavy. And this 21st century skills, it takes time. When we talk about creativity, communication, all these things take time. How can we add such dimension into already very busy and crowded the curriculum? And also there is many countries suffer or face high pressure of the high-stake exams. So if they're not tested, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter for getting into better colleges, why do they have to go on? And the parents might think, why do they have to spend much time? Some people said actually they're wasting time, but how can we sort of convince them that they're actually important? But at the same time, we saw very, very, very clear trend in the curriculum, for instance, very clearly moving away from content and the knowledge-based curriculum into more multidimensional or competency-based curriculum. And so it's more about how much they know to what they can do with the knowledge they know. And then we saw very clear phenomenon that then there is more stronger focus on the socio-emotional domains of learning in the curriculum we reviewed. And also more and more countries are moving towards introducing or increasing interdisciplinary curriculum, themes-oriented, issues-oriented, problem-oriented learning into their existing learning system. And also the teachers are also changing. And then unlike the Professor Iyoshi's presentation in the view of the future education, there will be no robot teacher replacing the actual teachers, luckily. But then at the same time, why so? Because there is a reason. Because the role of teachers are changing. If it's only about transmitting the information, yes, that could be done by robots. But it's more than teachers' roles are more than that. Now it's becoming more like a facilitators of learning. And then also, so the teachers are no longer a controller of learning. They're telling students what to know and then what they don't have to know. From that to more the creator of the learning, the environment that is conducive to learning. And so therefore the pedagogy they have been implementing has been changing from the more traditional chalk and talk lecture type teacher-centered approach to more creative, innovative and creative student-centered teaching practices. But in order for that, teachers need to be better prepared. So we feel that at UNESCO, we feel teachers are the key for the future education. Whatever we do, if the teachers are not ready, if teachers are not rightly incentivized, nothing will happen. So therefore, we feel strongly that the teacher's status must be improved in the society, or even restated. And also the relevant training must be available for all the teachers, and even pre-service and in-service. And also such teachers must be rewarded and effectively. And in the area of assessment, that's another big area when it comes to 21st centuries. There is a tension between the continuous pressure on high-stakes exam. As I said, I'm from Japan as well. I've been through all these high-stake exams. And if someone tells me, okay, I have to spend like weeks doing something that is not tested in the college exam, I would feel like, why? And then my parents may not be very happy. So that's a fact. We cannot just convince them to all of a sudden change their minds. At the same time, we see that there is an increasing recognition of the 21st century skills in assessment, but it happens more on the school and the classroom level. How to reflect them into high-stake exams is another challenge. Malaysia has embarked upon the reform, and then the countries can learn from their experiences, but it's a big area. And then the big question is big question we want to ask here is do we actually measure what we treasure? And the answer is unfortunately in many cases no. There is a big gap between what is tested and what is considered important in curriculum. So there have been many big major issues, and we still don't know. As a UNESCO, we are still trying to find out, coming up with some guidelines and the regional and common understanding. We are still on the way, but then it's important to start sharing information because each country is tackling the issue very differently, but we can still learn from each other. And then I wanted to finish this presentation with a video, but I'm not sure if we created this video to summarize all the discussions and the research we have done, and what kind of skills and then competencies we found
towards inclusive and as we enter a new era for education, governments from across the world have committed to a vision, Education 2030, towards inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning for all. But are the education systems of today adequately preparing learners for the world of tomorrow?
Our world is constantly changing due to rapid technological advancement, increased mobility, demographic changes, increasing inequality, and environmental degradation. All these changes are ultimately affecting the way that we live and work. This means that our education systems need to be preparing learners for jobs that don't even exist yet, and some say that it won't be long until machines replace us in many jobs. We're not just talking about manual work. Machines will also gain other skills traditionally considered keys to success in so-called white-collar jobs.
Of course, today all learners still need to know the basics such as reading, writing and arithmetic. And then they also need technical skills to prepare them for specific jobs to work in agriculture, as a designer, artisan or as a computer technician. But are these the only skills that they need? There are many other skills which are important in today's world, and they have been given countless names, such as non-cognitive skills, soft skills, 21st century skills, transferable skills, and transversal skills. All these many terms cause a great deal of confusion, but what is it that they all have in common?
Let's take a step back and look at the big picture. All of these terms refer to an overall idea and purpose that we can all understand. A wide range of values, attitudes, skills, and behaviors, such as communication, leadership, and teamwork, among many others. So why are they so important in today's world? Think about it. Across any kind of job, whether you're a politician, CEO, teacher, or a street vendor, you need to have skills and attributes such as resourcefulness, perseverance, and entrepreneurship. They are truly relevant to each and every one of us, regardless of our background, field of work, or status. Also, if we really want to build more peaceful and prosperous societies, we need to start not just in the classroom, but with the individual, so learners can develop critical thinking, creativity, and the curiosity to learn. Education needs to prepare learners to live together with others through developing empathy, tolerance, and respect for diversity. But unfortunately, most education systems fall short of equipping learners with these crucial skills.
So what do we need to make this a reality? First, they need to be made a priority in education policies and recognized across all areas of the curriculum. Teachers need to be supported and equipped with innovative strategies so that they can become facilitators of learning, not just transmitters of information. Then, they can encourage learners to work in teams and engage with the world around them. And then we also need assessments beyond tests and exams that give importance to these skills so they can truly reflect the many talents and abilities of learners. All of us, whether we are policymakers, educators, parents or students, need to take action. How can education systems keep up with our changing world? How can they better prepare learners to lead happier, healthier and more productive lives? And what is needed so that they can truly contribute to building a more peaceful, equitable and sustainable future? Tell us what you think.
Tell us what you think, please.
Thank you, Ms. Satoko Yano, for the very interesting insights in education planning. Any questions for Ms. Satoko Yano from the participants? Yes? Kindly introduce yourself and where you're from.
This is Sudabe from UKM. I have a question, and I want to know, does educational planning help with financial aid and scholarship? Thank you.
I'm sorry. Your question is about the scholarships to the... Sorry, can you rephrase your question again, please?
This educational planning also help with financial aid and scholarship to the students?
As a program we have now, the answer is no. But our work is more to work with the government and another, so as a providers of education, also to increase the scholarships and then funding sources for the students. And if you look at the new Sustainable Development Goals for education, there's a clear goal to increase the financial support available to the students from the developing countries. So I think there is a trend, but then unfortunately as a program we have not UNESCO, we don't have the provision for the scholarships.
My name is Muhammad Noor Muhammad Taib from one of the teachers training colleges in Malaysia. I just want to ask you your opinions about the assessment, because one of the most important factors that can give high impact to the future's education is assessment. but I'm not really sure which kind of assessment that we are looking for that we should emphasis on. Learning, assessment for learning, assessment to learning, or assessment as learning. I suppose I'm more interested in assessment in learning, but I'm not very sure. What is your opinions? Thank you.
I think it's a very, very important question. It's a very crucial question, an assessment for what? And then we feel that the yes, assessment in learning is very much becoming more and more featured, especially when it comes to the 21st century skills. It's more like the assessment, something we call formative and then summative assessments. And then in formative assessment, we use the assessment in process of learning. And the 21st century skills may be more suitable for that kind of assessment, and less so when it comes to summative assessment, which is usually for the high-stake exams. But then the thing is how to create or bridge between these two. So how we can learn from the formative assessments of 21st century skills that happened in the classroom to inform their futures in terms of the academic career and the academic choice. And then so I think there is a effort being made to combine these two, and then also this portfolio approach is one of them, to reflect the aspects from the students' achievement in 21st century skills in more the assessment at large. Not sure if I answered your question or understood your question correctly, but that's how I feel. But an assessment itself is becoming a really difficult area. And at the same time, the technology can facilitate this area as well. I think that in the morning, Professor Yoshi mentioned that some of the assessment of such skills, some of them may be able to done by algorithms in the future. Of course, it's going to be difficult, but the technological support, the assessment of such skills that we consider now impossible might happen. But then again, it's everything is evolving at the moment. So the one thing that UNESCO is doing at the moment right now is reviewing the assessment mechanisms that are happening in the countries in the Asia-Pacific region, specifically in the area of the 21st century skills. So we first like to know what's happening in the region, and then learn from each other's lessons. And then I think there are many countries that have embarked upon quite ambitious reforms in assessment. So hopefully in the early next year, we can come back to you with a report that's saying what's happening in the countries, and then also some policy implications in the assessment.
Assalamu alaikum. It's just about sharing some information about education in the UK. I think one of the greatest challenges there we face in the UK is not so much about the policy. We're just asking the central government to stop making policy. This is the thing. I'll give you an example. Because of the financial crisis, a lot of schools are facing budget cuts. So teachers are, they are compelled to do more with less. But then you have this policy, and then you have different government agencies interpret the policies in different ways. So, for example, like Department of Education produce their own guidance, and then you have Ofsted produce its own guidance. So schools ended up with more than 3,000 pages of guidance on how to achieve the best education in the world. So that gives a lot of pressure, to teachers and schools. At the end of the day, we are experimenting with what is now known as free schools, in which free schools are not tied up to national curriculum. This is actually an attempt to liberate schools. Just we have universities now setting up their own free schools. University of Cambridge, University of Birmingham have set up their own schools. So if in Malaysia, I'm not sure to what extent, but if we have this kind of over 2,000, 3,000 pages of guidance notes, is going to drive teachers crazy. It's just about sharing some experience.
Thank you very much. I completely agree. Perfect. I mean, word to word. Yes. And then the issue is, especially with now, everybody is facing a financial constraint, and people want to see the value for money. And the government, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Education is accountable to the Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance is asking what is the outcome? What did you meet the key performing indicators? And when it comes to education, sometimes it's very difficult to measure in a way that business outputs are measured. But then sometimes the education is now being sort of run by the business rhetoric. And also it's very difficult for teachers or educators to follow because sometimes it just doesn't make any sense. And also the governments keep making policies. I don't know, maybe because it's their job, it's bureaucracy, that's what they need to do to keep their jobs. But then my point here was, if they cannot come up with a policy that the people are ready to implement, that the governments are not ready to provide enough support, sufficient support for implementation, just don't do it. It just creates confusion, overburdens teachers and others. And then sometimes, as you said, sometimes one department will say something, another says some different things, and then sometimes school education department is saying something completely different from higher education. So there is a great deal of discrepancy and inconsistency. That's something at UNESCO Bangkok, especially at my unit, it's going to advocate against. There has to be a consistency throughout the education system. It's because it's about someone's life. We're not talking about someone's life in primary school and completely something different from the higher education, but someone's going through the education system. There should be a consistent message throughout the system they have been receiving. And unfortunately, many governments are not structured that way. Sometimes they work in isolation and they don't talk to each other, and they come up with their own guidelines, maybe 3,000 pages, without necessarily giving them enough resources to implement. So that's a major bottleneck, what we see. And then, yes, I completely agree. And then also sometimes UNESCO comes up with new ideas, and we also to be blamed as well. But I think it's important to be aware of it.
I think we have another question from the back.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon. My name is Tengku Shahrum from University Selangor. In doing research and developing policies, I think one of the areas that we have not really looked at is actually the system of education per se. We are still propagating and continuing a system that was developed 100 years ago, which was meant to develop human beings for specific job skills in order to be able to work in factories and things like this. That's why our education system is still very regimented. For example, where not only in place as well as in time and age. If you are 7 years old, you've got to be in grade 1. If you are 13 years old, you've got to be in grade 8, for example. Now, but people do not learn the same way, at the same rate. Even in terms of gender, in Malaysia, for example, you have to be taking your SPM, whether you are a male or female, at the age of 17. But we know that the females mature faster, that they are matured by the time they are 14 and 15. But the males are still children at the age of 16 and 17, but they're competing at the same level. So I think more research or more policies has got to be looked at the regimented system of education that we have made. And what we are trying to do is say that we are trying to make teachers, make the environment within the classroom but the classroom is within a regimented system that is killing what we are trying to do in the first place. So these are issues that we should break ourselves from just looking at what teachers can do in the classroom, but as well as how the whole system needs to be broken down again and relooked at, so that every person within their own life, within their own age and way of learning is able to learn at their own pace, at their own time, with the not being regimented by all this the system of education that we are propagating.
Thank you.
Sorry if that
That's okay.
complicates matters.
No, thank you very much for this very, very also again important, raising this important issue. Yes, I think we agree as well that in this sort of current model, production model where education is obsolete. We are not putting, it's not like input process output model. It's probably not very relevant anymore. And we believe that the technology can provide a huge opportunity for such individualized learning. And at the same time, there is a social value of having schools, being together with with other students, and being in a learning environment. So then I think it's true that education there should be a paradigm shift in education. And I think that's why we started talking about, okay, roles of the teachers have changed. They're no longer transmitting the same information to all the students as regimented and in the regimented system, but rather they are more like a facilitator of learning or curator of learning, where the students may be learning at a different pace and different things. And it makes everything so much more complicated for teachers and then the education system. But then if we don't do it, again, the teachers may be replaced by machines. If you're going to send the message and send the same information, and then don't help the learner, don't help with the tutoring and the facilitating individual learning, I think the role of teacher itself might become obsolete. So now it's a very, very critical time of the reforming and the rethinking education. It's happening. And then yes, we agree that then we have to move into the new system and that there should be a systemic reform to education. Thank you.
One last question before we break for lunch. No more questions. Thank you, Dr. Satoko Yano.
Thank you.
For the very interesting presentation. So now we shall break for lunch.